on that note, it is 5:30 and time to start the meeting. Let's start with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will stay standing because the first thing on our agenda is a special activity, oath of office for Carrie Huff, BTA alternate member. Carrie, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Carrie Huff,
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties required as
and I will faithfully discharge the duties required as
an alternate member of the Board of Zoning Appeals
an alternate member of the Board of Zoning Appeals
of Clearcreek Township,
of Clearcreek Township,
to which office I have been appointed
to which office I have been appointed
according to the law and the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. You get one of those, by the way.
Back over.
If you'd like.
You can call my meeting.
Thank you. You'll love the pay.
You're starting where I did, so be careful. It can snowball. And we have public comments. No public comments. Items to be removed from the consent agenda, gentlemen.
I have nothing. One note, the minutes that you see in there reflective of a special meeting that we had on January 27th instead of a regular meeting on the 26th. The only change.
And it was technically a special regular meeting.
Technically, it's a special meeting.
We just moved it today.
Correct.
Okay. And it was special because?
Letter.
Uh-huh.
Because you were here. Put that right on.
Sorry.
I mean, is it possible to mute him?
Stop paying, we'll stop
There
paying.
you go. Take that into consideration. Fiscal business.
There he is. I do have something I want to update the board about. I was at the OTA winter conference last week. There's two bills that have been turned into law by the legislature, and I wanted to give you an update on them. They're House Bill 309 and House Bill 335, and they directly affect how property tax revenue and budgeting are going to be done from now on. Both of these laws will take effect on March 20th, 2026. Over the past several years, property values have increased significantly across many parts of Ohio. While higher values can be positive, they resulted in sharp and sometimes unexpected property tax increases. In response, the General Assembly adopted several property tax reforms intended to slow that growth and improve predictability. While at a high level, these changes are designed to limit automatic tax growth, increase oversight, and also make property taxes more predictable for residents, they do not eliminate property taxes, nor do they remove voter control over the levies. House Bill 309 expands the authority of the County Budget Commission, which consists of the county auditor, treasurer, and prosecutor. The chairperson of the county commission is appointed if the prosecutor recuses himself. Under this law, the Budget Commission has greater authority to review and in some cases reduce millage rates when it determines that revenue collected exceeds actual funding needs. The Budget Commission can choose to reduce any levy that they consider unnecessary or excessive. Even if 100% of the people in a township approve a levy, the Budget Commission can reduce the levy after the first year. If the township disagrees with the Budget Commission reduction, the township is permitted to take the issue to the State Tax Board of Appeals. For Clear Creek specifically, this means levy revenue will be subject to additional review at the county level. While the stated intent of the legislation is not to reduce services, clearer documentation of operating needs and long-term planning will be increasingly important. Fire engines are about $1 million apiece, and S units are between 400 and 450,000 apiece. Road trucks are 225,000, and fully outfitted police cruisers are $100,000. Clearcreek will need to develop a financial plan that explains what our carryover balances are used for and to explain anticipated capital expenditures. The other bill that they talked about was House Bill 335, and that addresses inside millage. Inside millage is the portion of the property tax revenue collected without voter approval. Historically, when property values increased, inside millage revenue increased automatically. What they did is House Bill 335 increases inside millage revenue following a reappraisal or update and limits it to the rate of inflation. So instead of actually basing it off of what the property values are, they're sort of putting a cap on it based on inflation. This charge prevents large value increases from automatically resulting in large tax increases. And as a result, our revenue will grow, but not at a higher rate than normal, because typically it sort of jumps in spurts. And so, in closing, what that means to all of us is that we're going to, the administration, department heads, fiscal office, and you guys will need to work together to create a financial plan that we can give to the county budget commission. So, in short, the county budget commission is getting, the general, let me be clear about this, the general legislature, the Ohio legislature put this into effect. It's not something that Matt Nolan, well, actually he did have something to do with this. He actually was on the committee that created this particular law. But it's something that we'll have to be concerned about to make sure that we show where our carryover balances are at. If you have any questions, I can attempt to answer them.
Well, I guess my only thought on it is, obviously, we need to just form a committee within the committee and lay out a plan to be able to answer the questions. When we've got our operating budgets, and our departments are pretty tight on it, so.
Yeah, I have no problem with the budgets. All we'll just have to do is to make sure that we have that we create a financial plan that shows what our carryover balances are actually being used for. Typically, before, they didn't care. You know, it was something they just approved. But now the legislature has inserted that county budget commission into the mix, and it's up to them. Now we have to. Not only do we have to have it for the board, but we also have to have it for them.
And that oversight isn't extended to the county commissioners, it's just for all boards within the county.
I don't know what it does on the county side. I can only answer for the township. I do know that the president of the county board is an alternate if the county prosecutor recuses themselves from the budget commission.
That may be part of the oversight, not part of the people who take that. Interesting.
Okay. That's all I had for tonight, sir.
Okay, thanks, Russ. New Business Administration, Resolution 5648, a resolution authorizing the township administrator to incur obligations greater than $10,000 on behalf of the township, dispensing with the second reading and declaring an emergency.
The three items on the incur obligations resolution today. Ryan budgeted and would like to replace the miller that we use to mill up asphalt for patches. The 2014 Bobcat that we have has been given fits. It doesn't retrofit well with newer equipment and consistently been breaking down on it and taking too long. So we got a quote for a coal planer miller from Zimmer Tractor for $23,676. And that includes a $3,000 trade-in credit for the 2014 Bobcat. Second item is a recommendation to authorize our annual contribution to the Warren County Drug Task Force in the amount of $17,176. And the third recommendation is to authorize the annual subscription for a lexical policy and procedural manual for $12,341 to change. Any questions I might be able to answer?
Do I have a motion to pass 5648?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. Resolution 5649, a resolution declaring personal property as surplus and approving an internet auction, direct sale, donation, disposal, or destruction of said personal property, dispensing with the second reading and declaring an emergency.
Well, the first item is the 2014 Bobcat planer that we're going to trade in, and surplus that. And the second is we're going to say goodbye to old Bessie, the 2012 Dodge Durango crew that I drove for the last 6 years. She's got 193,000 miles on her, and she's tired.
Understood. Okay, do I have a motion to pass 5649? So moved.
Second.
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. 5650, a resolution approving an annexation agreement between Clearcreek Township and the City of Spring Grove, dispensing with the second reading.
This one might look familiar to Mr. Mearsclaw and Gabbard, new for Mr. Holtree. This is the annexation petition that came before the board in late 2024 for what's better known as the Kaiser property in front of the school's campus. The board consented in 2024 to let that property be annexed into the city by the request of the property owner / developer. The only difference in this annexation agreement that's Exhibit A of this resolution is that instead of a more dense residential PUD, the applicant has asked for it to be developed under the city's straight zoning standards of R1. And that is literally the only difference that was presented to us from the city of Spring Grove. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
I do not. This is the first for me. We've had to redo it.
They never moved on it in 2024. There was discussion.
Oh,
of moving
well,
it forward.
that would make sense why it's back to us. That would make perfect sense.
I apologize, I should have explained.
No, that's fine. I was like, why is this back to our table? Okay, do I have a motion to approve 5650?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. Resolution 5651, a resolution to appoint Clearcreek Township resident Kimberly Ann Hensley to the Warren County Community Services, Inc. Board of Trustees, dispensing with the second reading and declaring an emergency.
I won't bore you with semantics on this, but the executive director called me in a panic asking us to pass some sort of legislation to write some letter of support for one of our township residents to serve on for her county-wide nonprofit community organization that serves the entirety of Warren County. And in the spirit of cooperation and trying to help her out, I said, sure, why not? But it does kind of draws into question in my mind the legitimacy of the appointment, because it is a county, even though it's not an agency of the county, it is a county-wide agency, so it would seem more appropriate if the county board of commissioners would appoint someone. But she reassured me that any governmental jurisdiction inside the community could appoint someone to her board, so here you have this resolution.
Did you ask her why she didn't take it to the commissioner?
I did, and the executive director did not have a clear and concise. She didn't share my thought pattern on it. She was just looking for a quick fix.
Which, for better or for worse, I'm in complete alignment with Mr. Clark, so I think his thought process is correct.
So are we authorized to appoint someone to a county board as a township?
According to the executive director under the Community Services Block Grant Program, she said we are.
What do we pay you for again?
I don't think this is necessary, and I don't think it has any legal value, if you want my opinion, because the tripartite agreement refers to services provided by the county. As much as we'd all like it, you guys don't all represent the county, you only represent Clearcreek Township. So I don't get it, but Mr. Clark does have a point, in fairness, that the person who is running the organization says they need it from us. Whether that makes sense or not to us may not matter to them. It clearly doesn't matter to them because Mr. Clark has, I think, persuasively argued that, and it doesn't seem to matter to them. So, my suggestion is that if this is not worth the paper that it's on, it's not worth the paper that it's on. You were clearly advised, you believe that, but the people who think it's worth something are really the only one that matter.
For what it's worth, I did leave her with both the impression that it should be the county commissioners, and I would pass it on to the county administrator to let him know that we had considered this resolution. But it is probably best that they reaffirm or do their own.
Is this time sensitive?
She asked for it sooner than later, so I drafted it as an emergency.
Well, we can pass it and it not be worth the paper it's written on, so. Do
Which
I have
was my thought in the end.
Do I have a motion to pass 5651?
So moved. Second?
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. I'll go first. Recommendation to reclassify part-time parks crew person Hunter Wiseman as probationary full-time effective February 14th, 2026, subject to a one-year probation at an hourly rate of pay of $21.
This is the second domino to fall with Hunter Van Pastor being promoted in the road department. Current part-timer Hunter Wiseman wishes to fill the full-time position effective next week. We will backfill part-time, and we've already got several seasonal candidates that are in the jet. So this would be the second of three dominoes to fall.
Do I have a motion to approve this recommendation?
So moved.
Second. Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. And we have a recommendation to appoint the following applicants as seasonal park crew persons effective on their respective start dates at the following hourly rates pending acceptable pre-employment testing. New hire Brogan Miller at $15 an hour, returning Carl Childs at $18.50 an hour, returning Matthew Warren at $15.50 an hour, returning Nick Warren at $15.50 an hour. That's pretty much it. Do I have a motion to approve this recommendation?
So moved. Second?
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. Anything else under new business
No.
administration? Okay, planning and zoning.
Sir, we have a recurring.
Wait a minute. You're kidding me.
I know, it's hard to believe. As you saw in your emails going back and forth, in response to the property owners who complained about the situation in January, the expectation was that they would have established some type of carport to contain. Nothing's been established on the property, and the vehicle is still viewable from the road right of way. So we're asking for it again to be placed forward as a nuisance.
Resolution 5652, a resolution determining the maintenance of 3555 Marianne Drive constitutes a nuisance and ordering the removal of junk vehicle after sufficient notice dispensing with the second reading and declaring an emergency. Do I have a motion to pass 5652?
So moved. Second?
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. Is that all?
That's all at this time, sir.
Could you check with them, see if they'd be interested in that Durango?
I had not thought of that, sir.
Hey, hot dog.
That ring is in way too good a shape for those folks. Fire district. Recommendation to accept the generous donation of $1,000 to benefit the fire district by Enterprise TE Products Pipeline LLC.
With our annual donation from them.
Do I have a motion to accept this recommendation?
Moved. Second?
Mr. Holtree?
Yay.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. Anything else, Chief?
Good thing in this weather, we've got some great ice rescue training in the past week.
Yeah.
So fun that silver
Already?
lining. Yeah, it's been good.
Something fell off my roof today during a meeting that I was on, and I'm not sure what it was, but just thought I wasn't outside when it hit the ground, so.
We've been fishing this week.
Yeah.
Scary stuff. Well, I hope everybody stays safe and keep it to a minimum. Hopefully tomorrow will fall more than hurt. Police Department, recommendation to accept the generous donation of $1,000 to benefit the Police Department by Enterprise TE Products Pipeline Company LLC. Same?
Ditto.
That's it? That's all you got?
Ditto to the bar.
Do I have a motion to accept this generous donation?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Holtrick?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. Anything else?
I mentioned board at our last meeting that we were, had a trial pending relative to the New Year's Eve shooting, and that trial was concluded after about 4 days. I'm guilty on all counts, including the attempted murder, so the individual will be sentenced coming up here pretty soon, so.
Great job.
Everybody did a great job on that.
Detective Barton got a shout out from the county prosecutor on social media, so.
It made it to People magazine, someplace in New York, one of the magazines. I guess the twist of husband, boyfriend, all those things was enough to catch everybody's attention, so.
Fox News, too.
Amazing. Roads didn't get any money from the pipeline, but what else do you have?
Nothing at this time.
Well, just another great job. I know it's been a rough run here.
Thank you.
You guys have done outstanding.
Appreciate it.
Sure, everybody needs about a week's sleep, but hopefully this week will be a little bit of a break.
Yeah, they need it.
I'm sure we'll see what we can do to get some.
Thank the roads guys.
Good
We
lunch
had a
there.
terrible ice dam form on the backside of this building, and Brian tried to address it last week and did address it this morning with a hammer drill.
Yeah.
Got up there with a hammer drill and got rid of ice dam that was about a foot thick. So,
Each. Okay, consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
so moved.
Second.
Mr. Holtrick? Yay. Mr. Mearsclaw? Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. Staff updates?
I want to thank everybody for their responses on the capital budget request. Priority rank those and try to get something, into the request list for that. And engaged counselor on limitations on public comments in terms of timing, but we will talk about that sooner than later. And Jeff is going to have different planning appointments probably at our next meeting. Probably about June 10th. That's what I have right now. But I wanted to open the floor to Ms. Brenda Weaver. She is an expert on TIFs in the state of Ohio. And we were hopeful that she could talk to the board about TIFs in general and community authority and what that might even look like here in Clearcreek Township for a little bit. So Brenda, you can stand, you can sit.
Good evening. I didn't know if you had specific questions you wanted to start with, or if you want to start with a basic background.
Basic background would probably be a good place to start.
We'll start with TIFs, and then we'll go to community authorities, and then we'll let it all sink in and fire away with questions. So TIF has been around since the 70s. Started in the municipalities, and then there were statutes added years later for the townships and the counties. The statutes didn't really mirror each other in every way. At one point in time, they tried to make them more consistent with each other, and then of course, they can't help themselves. They keep tinkering, and now they're not exactly the same anymore, and so sometimes there are little nuances that are in the municipal statutes but not the township, or something in the county statutes but not in the others. So just, we'll talk in generalities, but there are little nuances for each of the entities. TIFs are real property tax exemptions, essentially, but they do permit you, not require, permit you to replace the exempted property taxes with service payments in lieu of taxes. And I would have to say that 98% of TIFs replace the taxes with service payments in lieu of taxes. There are a few where they are just out and out exemption of the property taxes and their service payments are replaced. I will point out that it's all or none. You cannot exempt 100% of the property taxes and replace 50% of them with service payments. It's all or none. You either don't charge any service payments or you charge the full service payment for the amount of taxes that have been exempted. Now, you can exempt any percentage of the tax. You don't have to exempt 100%. You can exempt 50%. The most common are 10 years and 75%, or 100% for 30 years. The rules with how to implement TIF and the hoops you have to jump through change at that 10-year 75% threshold. So you could do a 5-year 50%, not done very often, but that would still be under the same rules as the 10-year 75. Once you get past 10-year 75, it becomes a little more complicated because for certain kinds of TIFs, well, for all TIFs, the schools now have approval rights. For certain kinds of TIFs, the county also has approval rights. Come back to that. Schools always have notice rights, but they do not always have approval rights. So, for your TIF, you are exempting real property taxes on new value. So the value that exists at the time you put the TIF in place is not exempted. It continues to pay real taxes that are distributed to the taxing entity. Only the increase, what is referred to as the increment value, is exempted, and then that value can have service payments attached to it at the same rate as the taxes that are on the book. That money is redirected to the entity that creates the TIF. So in your case, it would be redirected to the township and put into a tax increment equivalent fund that you would establish when you put the TIF in place. That money can then be used to pay school compensation if you are at the threshold and the school has required it, and that requires you to pay compensation to both the joint vocational school as well as the regular school district if you're paying compensation. The joint vocational schools do not have any approval rights. They just sort of piggyback on the local, but they do have the same notice rights as the regular school district. Then after you compensate the schools, and if you have the kind of TIF where you have to compensate the county, you compensate the county, the rest of the money is to be used for public infrastructure improvements that are related to the development that's being exempted. Either because they need a new road, or they need an intersection improvement, or they need a turn lane, or they need water, or they need sewer, or because you have decided that even though it wasn't a necessity for their development or a requirement under the building code, they have caused an impact on your infrastructure that needs to be addressed because of either increased traffic volumes that you weren't really expecting from that type of development. So now you have decided that you need to make some road improvements with that money, or other public infrastructure improvements. So they're either necessary for the development or they're as a result of the development, is how the statute sort of words it. As I tell you, they're interpreted quite loosely throughout the state, but it is primarily public capital improvement. There are some minor nuances and circumstances where if you did a certain kind of TIF, you could use them on things that others might think are private improvements and related more to the developer's project than a public infrastructure. We'll get that in a minute. So, the kinds of TIFs that you can do are categorized in sort of 3 separate buckets. One is commercial. All of the development within the TIF area is going to be commercial in nature. And under the TIF statute, commercial is defined by the tax classification, which is a change that occurred about 10 years ago. It used to be defined by its use. And where this comes into play is with respect to residential. The second kind of TIF that you can have is residential. Multifamily rental units under the TIF statute are commercial, because that's how they're taxed. Even though their use is residential, and the TIF statute used to say residential use, they now say residential is defined by tax classification. Tax commissioner did not like the fact that apartments were taxed and considered residential under the TIF statute, but in most other instances they were commercial. So they are now commercial under TIF. And this is significant because if you have a mixed-use development, it might still all be considered commercial, even if you have apartments in it. The reason that there's a distinction between commercial and residential is there are a lot more hoops to go through to do a residential TIF. And the statutes refer to these as incentive district TIFs. There's a limit on how many incentive district TIFs you can have. That limit is a formula based on your assessed value and how much of your value is in these incentive districts. It's not based on the number of incentive districts that you have. It's a value-based formula. There's no limit on the number of commercial TIFs that you can have, and the county does not get to have a say in or approve commercial TIFs. The county is a party in incentive district residential TIFs. They get notice, they have approval rights, they have the right to ask for compensation. If we can't negotiate something, there's a default provision in the statute for a set amount of compensation for the county. So they're a player in there. Also in the incentive district TIFs, the residential ones, a number of the social service levies don't find their way into the TIF pot. They are not necessarily redirected the way that all of the other taxes are. Those are social service levies. There's a list of, they keep expanding the list. It was 12, I think it's now 14. It's what you think of, senior citizens, children's services, and then one of the library parks, those kinds of things. Any new or increased levies, so if they renewed with an increase, the renewal portion is not part of this, but the increased portion is, or a new levy after '06 is redirected back to the social service agency, not to the TIF. So all of the tax revenue is replaced with service payments in lieu of taxes in a commercial TIF, but not in a residential TIF. So in terms of how much money a TIF generates, it's significantly less on a residential, because you have the school to deal with and possibly compensate, and the county, and you have the redirection of various social service levies. In the commercial TIF, you only have the school to deal with, and there's no redirection of social service levies, and there's no county approval or compensation needed. So when you're figuring out how much is a TIF worth, it makes a big difference numerically whether you're talking about a commercial only or a residential TIF. In many cases, if they are going to do a TIF area that includes both kinds of projects, if they know exactly which parcels are going to be what, we can carve up the site and create different TIFs to maximize the revenue generation over time based on putting what we know is going to be commercial in this kind of TIF and putting the residential in a separate. But they have no idea what they're doing, and the reason that they may not is because if their mixed-use project involves condos, it gets very gray very fast, because whether condos are residential or commercial depends. Rental condos, are they owner-occupied? Do they have any idea? Are they creating separate parcels for each condo? They might be residential, they might be commercial, and they might not know whether they're putting them on top of retail buildings on the bottom, and now you've got a whole mixed facility. So it can get messy and complicated. So sometimes you say, well, why wouldn't they know where they're putting the flat rock? Because we all know developers. And change their mind too. They give you a plan and they tell you they're going to do this, and you go down the path and get stuff in place, and then they come back and say, oh, well, now we need to do this instead, and So, buyer beware when you're trying to set these things up on the basis of a preliminary site plan that may or may not be accurate. The third kind of TIF is what we refer to as a 41 TIF. This used to be available exclusively to municipalities. They added townships into this within the last 2.5 years. It's not very old for townships. What a 41 TIF is it allows you to be more flexible with your definition of public improvement that benefits the TIF. And in many cases, a 41 TIF is used for the primary purpose of redirecting the TIF money into private improvements rather than public improvements. Now, the catch to a 41 TIF is that the governmental entity putting the TIF in place, the city or the township, must be in the chain of title to the property. So, if you happen to own property that you decide you no longer want or need and you're selling it for economic development purposes, you would have the ability to do that kind of a TIF. Developers, of course, want you to buy property that you had no intention of ever buying and then sell the property to them for the sole purpose of having a more flexible TIF. There are a lot of issues with that if that comes up, we would spend an inordinate amount of time going through the particulars on that, but just back of your mind, it's out there. You have to be in the chain of title. There are some instances when you might not want to be in the chain of title on certain property, or lots of property. Environmental concerns come up in some cases, liability for other things come up. So 41 TIFs are out there. They're very new for townships, and you have to be in the chain of title. You do have more flexibility. So when a developer comes to you, or if you are considering a TIF, the first thing that you have to think about is which property is going to be included, how much, how little, what kind of development is going to happen there. I don't recommend putting great swaths of property into a TIF just in case. Because as we just said, there are different rules for the different kinds of TIFs, and you may not put the right kind in place if you do it too far in advance. So it's best to wait for a TIF until you know what's actually happening to the property. Unless, of course, back in '06, there was a great rush to put a lot of TIFs in place because there were major changes to the TIF statutes, and a lot of people just TIFed huge chunks of land because they did not like the changes that were coming. We're going to limit what they could and couldn't do in the future. But then when development didn't happen immediately, they then had to go back and amend stuff and change things as the law changed and development didn't happen. So I don't really advise just tipping just because and to be ready for development, because it really does depend on what kind of development is happening, what the developer needs, what the developer wants, which is necessarily the same, and what you think is in the best interest of the community. Which is another caveat I will tell you. Developers will come in and ask for stuff because it's trendy. They may not really understand what they're asking for. For you, you want to know what do they need in terms of infrastructure and or what kind of monetary hole are they trying to plug. Because what they think is the best route to get them where they need to go to get this development off the ground may not be the right tool to use. And so you want to know what they need, not what tool they're recommending you use and give them. We had a developer's attorney call us a couple weeks ago and say that they wanted us to do X, Y, and Z. Put in a TIF, put in a new community authority, put in a JED, put in, I said, how much money does your client need, And what do they need it for? Well, we want to know how much money could possibly be generated. Like, no. This is not how this works. This is not an open checkbook. This is a tool to get a development going if the legislative body deems that it is an appropriate project for the community and that it's appropriate to give a project incentive. But this is not an open checkbook. Developers will also come in and tell you that it's their money because they're the ones paying the property taxes or the service tax. No, it's the township's money. It's tax money, it's taxpayer money. It's not your money, it's your money. So, developers are fine. They're fine, they're challenging. So, when you want to put a TIF into place, after you decide that it's the right economic development tool, then you have to decide what kind of TIF do I need, commercial, residential, some of both, a 41 TIF, how many years do I need this TIF, how much money do I need to generate, how many years should I have my exemption for, what's their build-out schedule? Are they going to build everything in year one? Not. If it's a single project, single parcel, they're going to build it all in 1 year. Mixed use, lots of stuff happening, not going to build out in 1 year. Do you need separate TIFs for separate parcels? Maybe. How much of an exemption do you need? 50%? 75%? 100%? So you have to figure out what you need first. Then we decide, okay, this is the set of rules we have to use. They all require you to notify the school district. Under the 10-year 75, they're entitled to a 14-day notice, no approval right. If you exceed either 10 years or 75%, then you're jumped into the next category where they're entitled to 45 business days notice, and they have approval right, and they can ask for compensation. Now, for municipalities, there's another little nuance in the statute that they have to be aware of that doesn't apply to townships because it's related to income tax generation, which you don't have. If they were to do a 10-year 75% TIF where they don't need approval and they don't have to pay compensation, if their project generates more than or equal to or more than $1 million in payroll, they have to do income tax sharing with the school district. That's not really relevant for the townships, but just know it's out there when you're talking to your colleagues in other types of jurisdictions. So you notify the school. If you need their approval, you got to wait for 45 business days, and you got to negotiate a compensation agreement with them, and then you can move on. Cities also have a little nuance in their statute that says if they write into their ordinance that creates the TIF, that they will automatically compensate the school district 100% of their levies, they don't need the school's approval. They didn't put that language in the township statute. So you have to actually, you can offer them 100% comp, but you have to wait for them to agree to that and approve it, whereas the cities don't. So that, like I said, we tried to make these statutes all consistent about 15 years ago, and then they kept tweaking them over the years, and now they're not the same anymore. So cities have this little shortcut that is not available to the townships in terms of dealing with the schools if you're prepared to comp them 100%. How much do you have to comp a school district? It varies. It's based on what's going on at your school district, what's going on with state funding, what kind of project is it? Is your school district at capacity, under capacity? Is this project likely to bring kids into the district? And what the school district's position on TIFs and compensation was 3 years ago may not be the same as it is today. And it might not be the same as it is today in 3 more years because stuff is always changing for the school district. And so when you're talking to your colleagues and they say, oh, my school district, wants this, your school district may not want that at this particular time or for that particular project. So it's always a sort of, start from scratch and keep a good relationship with the school because you're going to be talking to them a lot if you have a lot of these kinds of projects. happening in the community. So you notify the schools, you get their approval, you negotiate your compensation agreement, now you pass your TIF ordinance. If this is a developer-driven TIF, and they are looking to get the benefit of the TIF for improvements on their checklist, even if they're the public ones that they need, you're probably going to negotiate a development agreement and/or combination development agreement, service agreement. If you need to issue debt, and it gets a lot more complicated in the service agreement because you want the developer to be guaranteeing that kind of debt. If you don't want to be the one issuing the debt and don't want that debt on your balance sheet, you can run it through the Port Authority. And they do this all the time. So this is not a novel concept for the Port Authority. It is more expensive in terms of administrative and issuance costs, but it becomes their issue, not yours. You then become just a pass-through of the money that you get, but you're not responsible if there's a shortfall and all of that. So you may choose to issue your own debt. You may choose not to. You can do your debt for one project and run it through the Port Authority for another project. So you have options. You know, if the developer starts talking about debt, don't immediately go, oh, I don't want this kind of debt on my books, because you can still participate without being the one that actually issues the debt. So you're going to negotiate a development/service agreement with the developer. What's going to be in there is going to depend on what kind of deal it is, whether there's any debt being issued or not, and who's issuing the debt, and all of that. And then, after all the documents are done, nothing really happens vis-a-vis the exemption. So a lot of people think, oh, I passed the TIF resolution, so now it's exempt. You still have to file the DTE exemption application form with the county in order for the exemption to actually be effective. And that can't happen until the tax year following the year in which you pass the resolution. So if you pass a TIF resolution this summer, you can't file the DTE until next fall of 27. So there is some, you know, we got to keep track of this stuff because there are time lapse in here, and as people, you know, change and move around, things fall through the cracks if you're not tracking these things, because you can't pass the resolution and then just immediately file the DTE so it doesn't get forgotten, because you have to wait until you get to the next tax year. So just, there is still a step. After you think you're done with all the paperwork and everything is done, there's another step that comes about a year later, and or longer, depending on other facts and circumstances. And so you got to have a little reminder thing. Somebody's in charge of this to make sure that it happens. So that's sort of basics on TIF. New community authorities are a whole other animal. They create a whole separate new political entity with a separate governing board and body. And it can be indefinite. Once it's created, it could live forever, and there is a process to get rid of them, but you don't necessarily control that process once it's created. NCAs used to be able to be created by the county and or the municipality. Again, they have recently changed the NCA statute to give townships the ability to create NCAs. And there is a whole, I printed out the statute because I cannot remember all of the distinctions. If you're home rule, you have to have these populations, and you have to have be in a county that has these populations. If you're not home rule, you have to have a different population threshold in a county with a different population threshold. So there are ways for townships to create NCAs, but there are some very set thresholds as to whether or not you do or don't meet them and can or can't create it, or have to get the county to create it or the neighboring city to create it. So in some cases the township can. You have to do a review of all kinds of population numbers, both yours and the county, to determine if you fit into any of the categories that can do it. sort of on your own to create an NCA. So new community authorities were created as a way to impose additional taxes. They're not called taxes, they're called charges. They look like taxes, but they're called charges because they're not voted on. So while TIF is redirecting taxes that have been approved by the voters or put in place under the Constitution in the case of things like millage, new community authority is adding new charges. The two most commonly used kinds of charges are an assessed value charge that looks like an added special assessment. It looks like a property tax. 1 mil, 1.5 mils, 2 mils on the property within the new community authority. In some cases, they will distinguish and say, okay, commercial properties will pay this rate and residential will pay this rate. So it can have different rates within the new community authority so long as they're by classification. So in other words, you couldn't say homeowner 1 gets to pay 2 mils and homeowner 3 has to pay 3 mils. No. All residential pays this rate, all commercial pays this rate, or the whole thing pays the same rate. So you have a little flexibility, but not parcel by parcel flexibility per se. The other charge is something that looks pretty much exactly like a sales tax. So an additional sales tax within the NCA that generates additional revenue. Now, while we said TIF redirected service payments are primarily used for compensation to other local governments and or public infrastructure improvements, NCA revenue can be used for operations, services, capital improvements, programming within the NCA. What the NCA can do with the money is much broader. It would, think of your general fund and what you can do with your general fund. The NCA money pretty much is treated like a general fund for the NCA. And so within however much territory encompasses the NCA, they can operate it. Now, they become a separate political subdivision under the statute, but they are still part of the township and the county, and they still have to follow all of those rules. They can't avoid your zoning. They can't avoid your police rules. Those rules all still apply. They just get to layer on a whole bunch of other rules if they want to and have a whole other level of governance. Now, I will tell you that most of the NCA boards, they kind of just stick to spending their revenue stream and they don't get too far afield in the other areas, but they do have certain authority and ability. They just don't get terribly involved in it. Now, the board that is governing the NCA, when it starts out, it's half of the township or whatever the city or the county ever creates it, and half developer representatives. It is supposed to, ideally under the statute, it is designed to become wholly citizens. So as the project builds out, each year you replace a developer representative with a citizen-elected representative, and you replace the township with until you get to a build-out stage where the board is now not appointed by the township and the developer, but is now elected by the people in the new community authority. Now, this becomes a little challenging depending on the kind of development. If you are doing a new community authority for a single-family residential subdivision, which is not what they were designed for, but I will tell you they are sometimes being used there. It might be easier because the residents might treat it as an HOA, and there are residents there. If you create a new community authority that is all commercial businesses, you don't really have residents, or voters or electors, and if you have something that's mixed use, but everybody's in apartments and they're very transient, getting people that live there to serve on these boards can be challenging. So notwithstanding what the statute says, a lot of these new community authorities in their origination documents and their bylaws provide for alternate ways to elect, appoint the boards that govern this entity. Because, you know, it can be challenging to fill seats on the board depending on what kind of development is happening. Again, if you're talking about a certain kind of development that is going to be owned and operated indefinitely by the developer, or even if that developer leaves, some other entity or developer type has to take it over, then you can write your bylaws in such a way that there are always going to be sort of developer representatives on the board. But if you're doing the kind of project where the developer comes in, builds it, and they're out of town and they want nothing else to do with it, the developer doesn't want to hang around and be part of this board anymore either. So whether you use the statutory preferred method for establishing your board, which means that eventually the township and the developer are gone and it's just citizen-based, or whether you write in an alternate, which is permitted under the statute, way of selecting your board, you need to think about that up front, and it's going to be based on the kind of development that it is and how big is your NCA and what is expected to be in the NCA, because you need to have a mechanism that's actually going to work long-term for getting your board there.
So I have two questions.
Yep.
In that case, is it possible to write in there, into that board would be, because you just said it, the way it's written, it's supposed to go away from the trustees and the developer. Is it possible to create it where it would function almost like a board of zoning and be under us? And I'm painting the picture of a commercial development, no residential voice whatsoever.
Part of that,
still be citizen-driven,
right,
but it would be...
Possibly, it's going to depend on what kind of commercial development. So again, if I said there's a developer who's hanging around and is actually going to own the properties and lease to tenants and manage the properties, they're probably going to want to have seats on that board and control those seats and who those representatives are. If the developer's thinking, you know, I'm selling this parcel to corporate A, and I'm selling this one to B, and I want out of town, and I don't want, you know, I'm not have any long-term management or ownership responsibilities, they would probably agree to that when they set up the NCA, depending on how they feel about what their end users are going to want. So that's one of the things for an NCA, and I know you have another question, is to create an NCA, you either have to own all of the property, or the developer has to own all of the property and petition you for the creation of it. Unlike a TIF, where you can just decide you're going to TIF/exempt certain parcels because you're replacing them with the exact same taxes they would have otherwise paid, the property owner doesn't always get a say. Again, little exceptions for when they do, but generally speaking, you can put a TIF in place even if the property owner doesn't really want it, or without even consulting them.
Right.
On an NCA, not so unless you own the property. So otherwise, the developer has to petition you and can only include property in the NCA that the developer owns or controls through 75 or 99, depending on, again, which provision, year leases of that property. So this board can't just decide, we're going to put an NCA on this part of the township, and we're going to decide that the board is going to always be controlled by us. It's a negotiation with the developer, and it really depends, because they theoretically are the ones requesting it.
Right.
And it depends on their end game. If they're going to be here long term, they're going to want to control 50% of the board.
Second question is, the TIF improvements that have to be used for road improvement. If you've got a development that none of the roads involved in it are township roads,
Yeah, you can still use TIF money to improve other governmental roads. Now, you might need permission, like if they're county roads, chances are the county's gonna say, have at it. We're happy to let you pay to improve our roads.
but what if we don't want to?
You don't have to.
Okay.
If they're city roads, it gets a little messier, because you can't really TIF inside the city anyway, so that gets messy. If they're state roads, it's a toss-up. Sometimes you can work this out with ODOT, and they're happy to have you pay for their improvements, and other times, it is just a mess. So, it's possible, but you don't have to, and, the county can't say, oh, because you have a TIF, you have to use that TIF money for these roads. They can ask, they don't have to agree.
Understood.
Now, if you don't have any other improvements that are needed, you might not really be putting the TIF in place, though. I mean, if there's not something else that and again, water and sewer are not really the township, but they are another governmental public improvement, so you can use TIF money to pay for water and sewer improvements that are necessary for development. But for the water and sewer to be public, they have to be part of, like, the main line. They are not the hookup from the line to the building. This is the developer's problem.
Right.
This is not public. Getting water to the site, getting sewer to the site, this is part of the public water sewer system, and even though townships don't really do water and sewer systems, the county does them or the municipality. You can use TIF money to pay to extend the county system so that this site has access.
Understood.
But again, they can't force you to do that.
Right.
Now, I will tell you, the county has the same TIF ability that you have.
Right.
So, to the extent that a developer comes to you and asks you for a TIF, and they want you to use the TIF to improve the county roads, and you say, no, we're happy to do a TIF, but we're not going to spend the money on that. We think this intersection over here needs to be improved because you're going to dump all this traffic onto our main road. They can go to the county and say, county, and if the county says, sure, we'll use the TIF money to achieve these roads, then now it's the county's TIF, now the county gets to make the decision, the county gets the redirected money. So, counties don't have that ability in the incorporated municipal areas. Only the city can do a TIF in the incorporated municipal areas. In the unincorporated area, either the township or the county can do the TIF.
That was a lot.
Sorry, yes. it is
You're
a
good,
lot.
because that was a lot, so.
You're not used to that good of service, are you?
No, we're normal.
Knowledgeable and
No.
breadth.
And there's so much more.
Yeah.
It's like, you can only absorb so
What
much.
happens when the service payments expire, whatever the expenditure was for the infrastructure projects, or, say for instance, the TIF was taken out without issuing debt? What happens when that number is satisfied?
So let's just, for instance, say that you put a TIF in place and you said, we're going to do road improvement X and it's going to cost $1 million. And we put the TIF in place and now we have generated enough money that we've either paid bonds off or we've just paid cash for the $1 million improvement, and yet, because of the kind of TIF we put in place, let's say we have 5 more years on the TIF that it would collect money, but we paid for this road improvement. At that time, the trustees make a decision. Do we have an additional public infrastructure need for the money that's going to come in over the next 5 years? And then we go ahead and leave the TIF in place, and then we put that money towards a project. It may not be enough money to pay for 100% of a project, but if they deem that they have other resources to pay for the rest of it, but they want to use as much TIF money as they can generate, they can leave the TIF in place. If they determine that they have no other public infrastructure improvements that they could pay for with this TIF, theoretically, they're supposed to terminate the TIF early and put it back on the tax duplicate. Now, I will tell you this isn't always happening because there's this tiny little provision in the TIF statute that says when the TIF expires or is terminated early, the de minimis balance in the tax increment fund at that time is transferred to the general fund and becomes available for any use that the trustees see fit. Now, the statute does not define what is de minimis. The statute also does not tell you what to do with the money if it's more than, if it's not de minimis. So it only says, we've had this conversation with the state auditors who, when the first of your colleagues transferred a very large sum of money out of their TIF into the general fund, the auditor's office was not very happy. And they said, you know, you should be redistributing that to the taxing entities in proportion to their tax levy. And he said, well, we don't disagree that that seems rational, but the statute doesn't permit that, and we, as a township, can only do what the statutes authorize us to do. And they don't authorize us to hand over a bunch of money to other local governments. So we think we're just going to put it in the general fund like the statute says. And the auditors went back and forth, and finally they said, okay, yep, we give up until the legislature changes this. And the auditor's office kind of tried to get them, but then, you know, something more pressing, important, got the legislature's attention, and this has not come up again. And so I will tell you that some of your colleagues leave TIFs in place even though they don't really have a public improvement beyond, they've already paid for them, but they just kind of let it linger a little bit longer, and then they transfer money to the general fund later. Now, the county auditor can look at these balances and ask questions and say, you've accumulated $2 million in here, you haven't spent any money yet, why do you have this TIF? And they can raise questions about the legitimacy of the tax exemption and the redirection of money if you don't have a plan to do something with it. So, you know, you don't have to spend it right away. You can tell them, okay, well, we need to do a $3 million road improvement, and we do not want to issue debt. So we are waiting until we accumulate $3 million, and then we will do the project. And that is acceptable. You're not required to issue debt and use the service payment to pay off debt. There is a urban renewal provision available to cities only that does require them to issue debt. They can't actually cash fund a project, which seems kind of silly. But in TIF, you can cash fund a project. So you're allowed to accumulate money in the TIF fund and pay cash. Now, in the case of a project that the developer needs for his development, he generally can't wait for you to accumulate that much money, or he can't start his development without certain kinds of public infrastructure. But if it's an infrastructure improvement that you've identified that's, you know, kind of not directly necessary for his, but is sort of adjacent to as a result of something he's impacting your infrastructure, you can wait. And so you can accumulate money, but you need to have a plan. You're also kind of required to tell the school district when you send them notice, why are you putting this TIF in place? What are your infrastructure plans for the use of this TIF? But once you pay for your initial one, you do have the flexibility to say, oh, it's generated more than we expected. We got a list this long, and these ones are not really related to projects. We can't pay for them out of TIF, but hey, this on our list of capital improvements is actually related to that TIF property, so we could actually put TIF money towards this one. So you have some flexibility there. It's not just what you decided on day one. Things change over time. You could get less money than you expected and not even be able to pay in full for what you were planning. You could get more money. You know, the only thing I'll tell you about a pro forma is you will never get exactly the amount of money the pro forma says. Something will change, but, you know, that's the other thing. When you get a pro forma from a developer, Yeah, they have rose-colored glasses all the time. You need to reanalyze any numbers they give you, because sometimes they don't really even understand how property taxes work or the incentive program that they're using. Sometimes they do, but again, they're just eternally optimistic, or they wouldn't be developers. I mean, you know. So you have to look at this from a worst case. What happens if this happens and this happens and we don't get as much as you tell us we're going to get? So,
Okay.
Got it?
Yep.
and I am always happy to talk about specific,
We'll-
details, circumstances when they come up, or other general questions.
We'll have some, I have a feeling, so.
Yeah.
You gave us the broad strokes and then some, so.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to have one of your cards.
Well,
It's been a great resource.
you're sending a half such things anymore.
In the past, so
Are you the media?
appreciate it.
Are you the media?
Do we have anything else on our staff updates?
I'm a resident of
Ready.
it.
Not for me, no. Does anybody else have anything?
I got information you really need to know.
Brenda.
What? I don't think I have any cards with me. I'm going to have to
Mr.
get
Gibbs,
more.
you missed public comments. Mr. Gibbs, you missed public comments.
Huh?
You missed public comments.
In other words, you're shutting me out.
I'm out
No,
of
sir,
cards.
you missed public comments.
Huh?
You missed public comments. It was on the agenda, and you did not get here in time for public comment.
Hey, but I can't help you if I couldn't get here, but I am here.
And we have an
You're doing
agenda
the
for a
same
reason, and our
thing.
meetings start at
You're doing
5:30.
the same thing, you're seeing bump, and I'll tell you right now.
Our meeting, our second meeting of the month is at 9 a.m. on the 22nd, I believe, or, excuse me, the
I come to
23rd.
this meeting, and you're all here, and the man said right up there, Mr. Abernathy, or Steve
23rd.
Weatherspoon, I was told to give him by the county engineer, says he plays golf or sports with his boss, I guess it was, the head guy down there. Well, after the meeting, I went to it, me and my wife needed to go Walmart. Who did come in? Mr. Weatherspoon. I hauled it, we went over and we talked. And he was right on windstorm and left.
Mr. Gibbs,
Yeah.
our next meeting is on the 23rd at 9 a.m. If you'd
Well,
like to
now
come in.
listen,
At 9 a.m., public comments are on the same list as they are every time, okay? We have an executive
Are you
session.
here to protect people of the county, of this area?
Yes,
All
there
right,
you go.
I just went over.
Do I have a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and go into executive session?
Pause.
Second. Mr. Mearsfall? Yay. Mr. Holtree? Yay. Mr. Gabbard?
Yay. We don't have any actions to report, so that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second?
Mr. Mearsfall? Yay. Mr. Holtree? Yay. Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.